Hello, everyone, and welcome to FilmograFeed, the show where we take somebody who made movies and look at their ups and downs and their don't look nows. I'm your host, Caleb Boatman, and with me on the desk is my best friend in the whole wide world, Mr. Caleb Coho. Coho, how are you feeling?
I'm excited to rip off Flight Check. This is gonna be great. Essentially, let's rip that Band-Aid off. It's basically like Blank Check, but like with a lot of weird alterations that are more us. Where we're not gonna be able to be as funny as Griffin and David, or as insightful as Griffin or David. This is literally just a similar idea with weird deviations in quality and format. But this will be fun though. I'm excited to like go through different filmographies and like find. I think there's like a lot of weird filmographies that we're gonna cover on this thing that people are gonna be like, "Huh, that's a person I didn't realize had that many movies in it," or something.
Yeah. What is Video Store if not ripping off other things?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
We here on the Video Store strive to give you the Walmart brand equivalent of all the things you like.
Exactly. The first person who we are doing for this series is none other than the film's directed by Barry Levinson. We were just kind of looking at Barry Levinson's filmography, and we were like, you know, this dude has a filmography that does not get talked enough because it is like very dope.
It was one of those things where like I just accidentally end up watching like I was watching just 3 or 4 different movies that I wanted to, and like they all happened to be directed by Barry Levinson, and it was that weird thing where I was like, what has he done actually, and like what can I find as like the through line, the connective tissue, and what else has he done that I've been meaning to see and not realized it was him, and it just spun into this podcast. This was an accident. But Barry Levinson is a crazy filmography to like look at, of just like starts out like as a writer writing some really like an Oscar nominated writer writing some great movies, and then finally gets to direct some shit, and it's like nuts where he goes. Like the first like 5, 6, 7, 8 movies, like even for his first 2 decades, you can argue doesn't really have too many big misses, mostly big hits. And then just, I don't know what happens in 2000, but when you look at the year 2000 and stuff, Y2K must have only affected Barry Levinson, because what a weird career change.
And we'll get to that way down the line. But
we'll get to that in a couple months.
Yeah. Today we're talking Diner, which is his first film. But before we jump into Diner, I do kind of want to give some context of where kind of Barry Levinson was at this point. So as you might be able to tell from a lot of Barry Levinson's movies, he sets a lot of things in Baltimore, including Diner, because that is where he was born. It's where he grew up. He attended college in Washington, D.C., so not too far away from Baltimore. He actually was a broadcast journalism major, but then he moved to L.A. To try to become an actor and a writer. The acting thing didn't really work out. But he became a writer and wrote on shows such as the Marty Feldman Show, the Tim Conway Show, and the Carol Burnett Show.
We stand Tim Conway, and I kid you not, we will probably do Don Knotts Tim Conway, like their 8-movie run of movies together. Something we might cover, just so I can do like a full episode on The Private Eyes.
You know, that's fair. Well, anyway, so then he got some screenwriting work, specifically working with Mel Brooks, writing both Silent Movie and High Anxiety. And that's where we get his first Oscar nomination, when he writes the Al Pacino film And Justice for All, which is his first Oscar nomination, which gets us to Diner, where he finally gets to direct a film. And this also gets an Oscar nomination, losing to Gandhi for Best Original Screenplay. But yeah, let's kind of jump in to Diner. General premise of the movie, basically just set in 1959 Baltimore, and it's about these group of 5 guys, or 6 guys, who all like to hang out at this diner. So I think what we'll kind of do, we could kind of go beat by beat in terms of the movie. I kind of want to go character by character because we kind of have so many arcs to where things shuffle back and forth so much. Let's go character by character. We're going to tackle the main 6 guys. We'll start off with Paul Reiser, who plays Model. He's probably the least important character to the movie.
But that's just Paul Reiser. Paul Reiser's just the most least important piece of every movie.
I mean, I like Paul Reiser in Aliens. You don't like Paul Reiser in Aliens?
He's fine.
I think Paul Reiser is like
he's a good shithead bad guy, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's good at being kind of sleazy, kind of scummy. And I think he gets some good things here.
He gets a moment or two, yeah.
He gets a good moment. I liked his back and forth with Steve Guttenberg, where he's like, "Hey, are you gonna eat that?" And she's like, if you want a bite of my sandwich, just say you want a bite of my sandwich. Just say it. Well, no,
he's so aggressive.
Well, if you're gonna eat it,
it's such an aggressive scene that I'm literally Kevin Bacon in that scene where he's just like, dude, just give him the sandwich if you want to give him the sandwich, or don't give him the sandwich if you don't want to give him the sandwich. Like him and Mickey Rourke being the 2 voices of reason in that scene are so weird.
Well, but then I love what Daniel Stern's character comes in and does, and just grabs the sandwich and takes a bite out of it.
It's great.
That is amazing. But yeah, Paul Reiser doesn't get a whole lot to do. So then you kind of have over to another arc. I think one that kind of flexes throughout the movie. We'll kind of pivot to Steve Guttenberg. Because Steve Guttenberg, I think, has probably the most famous arc of this movie. I feel like if you know anything about this movie,
he's not there's no lead, but if you're gonna pinpoint a lead, most people would tell you probably Guttenberg.
I would say either Steve Guttenberg, Mickey Rourke. I think you can also.
Mickey Rourke has a lot to do as well. It's that's why I don't think there is.
That's kind of why I'm saving him for last because I think he has a lot to do.
I think Mickey Rourke's the best character, but we'll get there.
I mean, that's completely fair. Anyway. Steve Guttenberg plays a character who is going to get married, and his fiance. He's clearly a little worried about how the dynamic with him and his fiance is going to go, and he's stressed out to the point where he is forcing his fiance to take a football quiz. A quiz all about football. Some of it about the Colts. Some of it just all about football. And this is old school football because this is 1959.
You bring up the Colts, and it took me a second with how when they first were oh, the wedding's going to be blue and white and all this. They talk about the Colts so much that it took me a hot second to be this. They're why is it the Colts are talked about so much in Baltimore? And I went, oh, it's 1959. The Colts literally were in Baltimore pretty a little bit before this. So it's kind of, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, no. I knew that. I thought that wait, aren't the Colts Indiana? So I also had
they are. They are. They're the Indianapolis Colts.
I know significantly less about sports than you do.
It's true. At least the NFL.
Yeah. Basically, he's going to force his fiance before she can marry him to take a football quiz in what I think is maybe one of the best scenes in the movie.
One of the best scenes in the movie for sure.
Absolutely, because all the friends come down and they're in this basement, and you're just hearing them rattle off different types of football questions. And I love Daniel Stern in this because there's a great moment where one of the questions is asked, and Daniel Stern just goes, Alan Amici, because he is so excited that he knew the answer to the question.
We heard you to the door, it's disqualified.
Yep. Question is disqualified. So I think that's such a great moment, and it's I think that's what Diner does so well, is all of these characters are so well defined.
Oh yeah, I don't even think it's not necessarily. It's the characters are so great, but I also think the camaraderie between them feels so natural, and that's definitely on the page. But it's also very much in every performance feeling super naturalistic and real, and it feels like they've all known each other forever, which is really fun. And I think that only strengthens the movie as a whole. is with how good everyone is in their individual performances as these different characters that they like are given in Levinson's script. So
Absolutely. I think like that actually comes to piece of information here, where Barry Levinson filmed the diner scenes last. All the scenes that were in the diner were filmed last, after everyone had already gotten to know each other really well. That was the last stuff they shot. And the scenes in the diner were like 50% scripted and 50% improvised. So like
awesome.
a good chunk of that was just improvised by the guys. And it had like a very type of like off the cuff vibe to it. I feel like a lot of those great diner conversations, kind of back to Steve Guttenberg and Paul Reiser, they have another one of my favorite back and forths in this movie where they're arguing over who is the better singer to better first in general better singer, but then better singer to like make love to, Johnny Mathis or Frank Sinatra. And like it's such a funny argument. They're getting really, caught up in it. And it's like those types of like pop culture conversations that are just my bag in movies. I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
But they ask Mickey Rourke, Johnny Mathis or Frank Sinatra? Presley. That's Mickey Rourke's answer. And that is like
I think it's a great moment. It's also an absolutely great character like reveal about who Mickey Rourke is, where it's like he's presented option A, option B, and he finds his own completely unique answer or spin on the problem. I think that that's like a great sort of introduction to Mickey Rourke. Mm-hmm. I think every time you see his name's Boogie, right? Or is it just
Boogie?
Okay. Boogie is such a great character. And like that comes from Mickey Rourke, who it took me way too long to realize that was Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
But I think like all of his different moments within the very first like stretch of that movie are such great like defining who this character is in little ways. Where it's like he's talking to the girl in the hallway. He's like, I think you should go home with Kevin Bacon. And like he's trying to help him out, finds Kevin Bacon punching out windows in the basement, and he's like, stop doing that. Like there's just so many like things where you just see him always looking out for his guy, even when Kevin Bacon's not aware of it. I think that he's such a protective like older brother figure to the group, like such a like figurehead sort of like top of like he doesn't propose he's the leader, he doesn't suppose it or put that on anyone, and no one really like everyone just sort of falls in line to whatever he is saying without him ever having to say anything. I think that's just like a great sort of thing where then they're like, okay, you have to settle the debate, like, and he's like, no, my own answer, so then I don't have to choose between either of you.
But I think what's interesting is while he is kind of the de facto leader of the group, he also is like a lot of times when you have the kind of stable leader character, right? It's kind of someone who's more like Tim Daly's character, right? Tim Daly's character.
Yeah.
Where he's more, it's the one who kind of has things together. It's the very like on top of everything. Mickey Rourke is very much like
the messiest. He's a mess.
Yeah, he's got the messiest. Maybe Kevin Bacon is a little bit messier, but it's like those two. Mickey Rourke,
Kevin
like,
Bacon.
He's had a gambling addiction, basically. The dude is like just
not only does he have like a gambling addiction, he's got like loans piling up. The phone call with his I think it's his mom on the phone with him. What it's telling him about is the loans call. He's like, I knew before you did. And it's like it's such a great scene where you just see him like going like, well, I guess I'll have to figure it out. And he like on the surface to his mom looks and sounds like he's being really like chill and cool about it. But you can just see it in Mickey Rourke's eyes that he's like, I'm fucked. Like, I'm so fucked.
Yeah.
It's such a great performance for him.
No, absolutely. Back to Steve Guttenberg for a second, because we'll kind of pivot back to Mickey Rourke, because I think Boogie does have like the most interesting. But back to Steve Guttenberg. I think, he is kind of like, you can tell he is the most tightly wound, maybe not the most tightly wound, but he's probably like, he's the inexperienced puppy of the group, and he's kind of probably the most frightened, I would say, of the group. He's the one who just is so concerned about how the future is going to go. right? He's like, there's a great conversation between him and Daniel Stern's character, who Daniel Stern is the only one of the group who's already married. And there's a great conversation where he's just wanting to know how are things going to go. So yeah, I think Steve Guttenberg gets a lot to do. Was there anything else you wanted to add about the Goot?
I mean, the Goot is, I think he's just like, he's such a good audience insert character to like latch onto, like to like get into this group. Gutenberg is very much the one that I think Levinson uses as your like perspective in character, and I think he works really well in that utilitarian role. I think he has some great moments of his own, but like I think like to find a way into this like very selective group, I think he's obviously the voyeur for the audience. I think he does a great job at it.
I would agree completely, but he's not like a boring voyeur. Like a lot of times,
the voyeur, he's an active participant.
Yeah, a lot of times the voyeur is just kind of standing back and watching. It's usually like the least interesting character of the show or the movie or whatever. But he gets a lot to do. Obviously, like the football quiz is like just such a character building moment, and all the other like kind of neurotic idiosyncrasies he has, I think, are really fascinating.
Yeah.
Including a great scene at a strip club that involves Tim Daly's character.
That's a great scene where you get to see Superman and his buddy at a strip club.
And the Police Academy guy.
Police Academy and Superman.
So Tim Daly, he's kind of the one who has it the most put together. This is a guy who he's coming back from college, and he has things put together, but even though on the surface he kind of has things put together, there's a great gag with him where in high school there had been some baseball game where he had gotten beaten up for whatever reason. And now all the people who he had beaten him up, he is one by one punching them and taking them down. And it is like such a hilarious thing to have a character do, of just like be still so petty about high school that he's just punching everyone who beat him up.
And I think it gives him such like a fun and interesting purpose to the group. Like something that's totally separate from the group. Because he's the last one to join. He like comes into the group from outside of it. So like to play catch up with him, you don't really get a lot from him right away. But then to have that moment where they're leaving the theater and he just goes up to someone, just whams them and just walks away and have to like catch up with like what the hell. I think it's so great to have him have like his own like ancillary agenda separate from this great time he's having with everyone that is so much different than what he's like intended purpose of being here for is like celebrate a wedding. I'm here to celebrate someone's new life, and he is stuck dwelling on his own past. I think that's
that's kind of the theme of his arc, right? Is because I would say he's the one who probably weirdly enough gets the most on his own of the film. Like he's the one who like his arc is kind of almost separate from everybody else's, because Tim Daly also has a storyline where his romantic interest, he's gotten her pregnant, and there's like a lot of debate about, okay, where are we going to go in terms of the future? And I think that's really interesting. But then while he's stressed out about that, he's talking to Steve Guttenberg, who is stressed out about his wedding and where things are going to go. And the two of them are inside of a strip club. And we alluded to it.
Great scene.
It is such a great scene. They're in a strip club, and Tim Daly goes up to the piano and starts playing. And all the other musicians up there just start joining along with him. And it's such a joyous moment.
What I love about that scene is that it starts, and with how he like is in this very like, I dwell on the past, and I'm a bitter sort of little bit of an angry person, and he's the one that we see clearly defined has a violent side. Yeah. And to have that whole situation start to break down where he's like, play upbeat, and you know that he could go off and beat everyone up in this entire strip club and cause a problem, or the club itself could collapse down on him, and to have him just get up there and then start playing the piano, and then the drummer slowly like get into it, and the saxophonist being like, fuck it, let's just start, and having it just suddenly go from the brink of maybe the worst case scenario for him that we've seen him enact throughout a lot of this movie, like pivot into the direction of his intended purpose of being here, which is a very happy, upbeat, celebratory situation. And I think that that's a great button on a scene that gives that character a lot of resolution emotionally. And I think that that's like a great way of like just like sealing that part of the movie up and tying it up in a nice little bow, where it's like, yeah, this guy right here is like, he could have had the most violent moment that ties back into his like embittered past moment, and just having it end in positivity. I think it's like a really great decision.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that like stay with me here. It kind of operates under the same like function as the tiny dancer scene in Almost Famous, because it has that same vibe of we're in kind of a tense situation, and then one person starts with music, and then another person joins in. In Almost Famous, it's them all singing Tiny Dancer until finally Russell, Billy Crudup's character, starts singing. That's kind of like the emotional culmination of the scene. And it's kind of operating under that same principle of you have one element of music, and then as the other elements of music come in, the tension is just relieved more and more, and it's just this joyous moment. I think like that is such like just a perfect way to just do pure like joy in terms of music while still having that tension that was looming in the background. I think just the removal of tension is like one of the best ways to just create like a positive scene.
It's just like a very cathartic end to that scene.
Absolutely.
Very, very well done.
Absolutely. We'll move on now to Daniel Stern's character, Shrivi, who I feel like this is one of the most interesting characters in this movie, because Shrivi could come across as maybe the least likable in this movie. He's clearly the most controlling. I feel like he's the most like kind of anal retentive. Played by Daniel Stern, Marv from Home Alone, and you might know him from other things. But Daniel Stern, the main conflict of him also involves Mickey Rourke's character, because essentially Daniel Stern, as we mentioned before, is the only one that's married, and there's a lot of marital problems going on with him and Ellen Barkin, who plays his wife. And I'll just say, I think she's fantastic.
She's great.
She is so good. Like, should have been nominated for an Oscar. Like,
I think 100%.
She is that good. Ellen Barkin is like fantastic. But yeah, Daniel Stern's kind of his defining feature is that he is a character who loves music to the point of being obsessed with, like, he knows the B side on every record. He knows all of these things. He's a very like, he's a very like trivia centric guy, but when it comes to music. So I think, that's where a lot of the tension kind of comes in.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, he's a little OCD.
Yeah.
And I think that like that, the scene that really pinpoints for me that character is the big fight they have where he's yelling about the alphabetization and the organization of his records, and having her like freaking out because she doesn't understand what she's doing wrong or how to help. And he just has this like block where he like doesn't care about how she feels or what's going on with her in that moment. It is entirely in his mind. His entire focus is on this thing that he loves, that he cares about being out of order. And that's what he tries to communicate to her in the most exasperated, frustrated way. And she's just not understanding what he's saying because it makes sense to him. It doesn't make sense to a normal human. And I
No,
think it's like
that's
such
true.
a great moment of miscommunication between two people that like if they had one person who could sit there and just translate, it would make sense and it'd be great.
I have two things about this scene. One, I want your thoughts about how Daniel Stern organizes his record collection.
Okay. As someone who has a record collection not 3 inches away from me, I have thoughts.
What are those?
Oh, the thoughts? Okay, so he goes by genre and then alphabetizes them within genre.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is an interesting, if not infuriating decision.
What type of psychopath would, take something and sort it
would have cabinet on cabinet on cabinet on cabinet of a thing that they love and then organize it by genre and then by alphabetization? Who would do that?
Oh yeah, for people watching at home, it's me. I'm the psychopath who has his DVDs sorted into genre and then alphabetized within the genre, because I'm an insane person.
He is an insane person, but no, I mean my records are by artist.
Mm-hmm.
They're just in order by artist. And then with the artists, it's alphabetical by album if I have more than one album by the same artist. So it just goes in that order. So like I have Hamilton and Dear Evan Hansen on vinyl. Those are alphabetized by Pasek and Paul and then Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
So on and so forth. So it's like I think that's an easy way to do it. But his record thing is so elaborate and anal retentive, and your Blu-ray and DVD collection organization is so elaborate and anal retentive, and it's funny.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I also think I do want to point out though, because there's a nice little button on this scene that I really
when Mickey Rourke shows up.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the button on this scene that I love is before Daniel Stern walks out the door to go out and drive, he says, "Ain't That a Shame?" was the song that was playing the moment I first saw you. And I think that's when the scene kind of shifts to where, like, you're on Ellen Barkin's side of, like, yeah, why is he, like, so obsessed with these? It doesn't make any sense. And you kind of realize, wait, this is how he like views the different moments in his life is basically by the music, and you kind of get, oh, that's why it's so important to him.
Yeah, it matters so much to him because music is literally his life, not just because he wants to make it or consume or whatever, but because he uses it to track the things that matter to him. And like, I think that Ellen Barkin, I think at the end of that scene, I think Ellen Barkin maybe even when he says that starts to have that moment where she starts to come around and understand what he means. Mm-hmm. I think it's like you're right. That is a great moment of clarity. Like a great, like that's like you can hear a pin drop at the end of that scene moment.
Absolutely. While we're kind of on it, because while we're talking about music, I just want to take a tangent to shout out how incredible this movie's soundtrack is.
It's a very fun soundtrack.
It's a great soundtrack, down to I love the way this movie opens. Because this movie has a fantastic opening where we get the title card of like Baltimore 1959 Christmas Day. Or Christmas night is technically the thing. But it's not Eve, it's like Christmas Day night.
Yeah.
And then we just open on like a party, and then we get the Everly Brothers song Shout playing. And it's
but we started at the like end. Like basically at almost to the end where they're in the like a little bit softer now.
It starts in the a little bit softer now. A little bit softer now.
Which is such a weird decision, but a great decision.
See, I think it works. I think it works so much.
Oh, no, it does. I think it's just it's an inspired decision.
Absolutely. To start it at a little bit softer now, because you're kind of like, okay, we're like taking things down. And then once we hear that a little bit louder now, a little bit louder now.
But it's also a great decision because when we join the movie, we're joining in a quiet moment.
Yeah.
Like when we find Kevin Bacon, he's punching the windows out in the basement by himself. Mm-hmm. And everyone is not quite linked up with each other when we first meet them in the movie. Like they're obviously there together, but they're not together when we first see them. Like Rourke's looking for Kevin Bacon. Like it's like a great music way of setting us up for what we're about to get.
Absolutely. And there's like so many other great songs in this movie. I think there's just it's an incredible soundtrack. Like a lot of movies set during this era or kind of like period piece hangout movies. Like this movie like exists in the same spot in my brain as like Dazed and Confused, American Graffiti, Everybody Wants Some. Like these types of like coming of age movies set in like one specific era.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Great soundtrack. We'll kind of now move over to Kevin Bacon's character, Wen, who Ren, excuse me. Ren, who is, I think, no, it is Wen. I was right the first time.
I'm like, what are you on?
Forgive me.
No,
but yeah, Kevin Bacon, who is giving such an unhinged, unlike anything I've really ever seen from Kevin Bacon performance in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, the only real bearing I have for Kevin Bacon in film come from like the really big famous things he's done, like Footloose, X-Men First Class, Friday the 13th, where he's like not really a character in any of those. He's like a caricature or like a stereotypical leading man Kevin Bacon performance, except for First Class, where he's just comic book villain B. And I think like this is like the most acting I've seen out of Kevin Bacon ever. I think he is probably the most dialed up to 11 performance in this movie. He is crazy, over the top, energetic, and like the more you see him act, he is the oversaturation of color on a group that is pretty like some of them are pretty like more monochromatic or like everyone is like pretty like in their zones of what they like have. And then Kevin Bacon is just like in your face as a performance, which matches the character, which is a just in your face character who is always up here and never comes down.
You alluded to the way that like he's the one who gets the big introduction, right? He is in the basement punching windows purely because like presumably he let another guy pay him $5 to go home with his date.
Yeah.
And then Mickey Rourke basically fixes it and like, no, you should go home with your date, and like goes up to the date and like, you should go home with Fenwick. And like basically Mickey Rourke fixes it for him. And what does Kevin Bacon do with that? He is like, you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to play a really dumb joke on my friends. And as they're all driving to the diner, he flips over his car, puts ketchup on himself, and makes it look like he has died in a car accident. Like, this is the unhinged, what is going on character of the movie.
Yeah, he's the most unpredictable person in this movie, where like at any given moment, you really don't know what Kevin Bacon's going to do. Which like leads to, I think that opening is such a great introduction to him, where he will not immediately let you know that he's bothered, and he will tell you he's not bothered, but his actions will always show you that he is devastated by whatever just happened to him, and he takes things super personally and deeply, but he will never treat it. He will never externally show it on anyone else in his group. And like that comes back with like the nativity when he sees where it's like immediately following the scene with his brother, which is gut wrenching.
Yeah,
which is it's an emotionally devastating line from Kevin Bacon, where he's like, I told my mom I always wanted a brother, and she said, you have one. And he goes, oh, so that's who the stranger sleeping in the other bed is like a incredibly powerful Kevin Bacon being snarky and making like a cutting joke, but like that's such a real revealing moment. And then immediately followed by him walking around drunk and seeing the nativity with the baby Jesus missing, and just getting into the manger and being like, I'll be the baby Jesus, is such a weird, like, I'm going to fix the problem in front of me because I can't fix the problem within me. Is such a like, that's such an incredible character trait that he like displays in everything.
It's so unhinged. And a little moment that I love just before this happens is he's watching this quiz show, and he's clearly a little bit under the influence while he's watching this.
Definitely under the influence.
Definitely under the influence. But he's getting all of the answers right. It is like insane. He's like pulling these things just out of nowhere. And it's this great disconnect of you have a character who's really smart, but he's kind of going nowhere. And I think that's really fascinating.
And I think it's that he's going nowhere because he feels like he can't go anywhere. It's definitely a character who has all the ability in the world to do incredible things. And he doesn't know how to do it. And he feels like there's something wrong with him that he can't get past that is going to prevent him from reaching any greatness that he thinks he just doesn't deserve. And I think that's just like an incredibly drawn character that Bacon just fundamentally nails in every scene.
No, absolutely. Completely agree. And now we'll kind of get to our last character who we've
the best character in the movie is Boogie, and it's Mickey Rourke, and he is incredible. He is just a phenomenal performance from Mickey Rourke as this like really like relaxed, calm, charismatic, charming guy, but also with like a really weird knack for manipulation. Like a really weird, like a knack, like really good at talking people into doing what he wants or to talking people to giving him what he wants. And like consistently will make bets with the other guys in like, can I get this person to go home with me? Can I get and having that culminate in like even the scene in the theater where he like puts his dick in a bucket of popcorn and like to win the bet. But then immediately following that up, he has that date. And like they're in the closet waiting, and I think the great Mickey Rourke moment of this movie for me is he's on the stairs with her and he goes, "Better no bet I can't do it." Mm-hmm. It's just like a great where he's like, "There's a line that I can't cross. There's a line that needs to be drawn," and in that moment he's like, "That money would go so far to help me personally, and my friends don't know I need that money either." Because he doesn't let anyone else know what his problems are.
Except for Kevin Bacon. He lets Kevin
Except for Kevin Bacon. But that's because he knows that Kevin Bacon's the only... Like, Kevin Bacon and Mickey Rourke are the two that are, like, almost entirely open with each other. Bacon's still defensive. But, like, Rourke feels very responsible for Bacon, so he'll open up to Bacon. But, like, I think that it's, like, such a great moment where he's just, like, most of the guys don't know I need it. But no matter what, it would help me. It would benefit me. I'd get so much out of this. But it's not right. And I think that's like such a great moment for him and such a character defining moment. I think that's like I think the reason why this script is brilliant and like a phenomenal Oscar nomination is how well it balances 6 different characters and gives each and every one of them that moment to come to terms with all these issues they have that are not put immediately in your face, very front and center dramatically like they could be, but everyone gets that moment where you see what's wrong with them, and then they get that moment where they get to prove that they're better than their problem.
Yeah.
I think that's like a great moment.
Absolutely. And I do kind of love the way the movie resolves Mickey Rourke's central problem, which is that he has a giant gambling debt that he has accrued, and he's probably going to get killed if he doesn't pay this off. Yeah. Ultimately, it starts out as kind of like a Deus Ex Machina thing where this older guy pays it off for him as like kind of a respect to his father. But then the older guy says, "Okay, I want you to come work for me at my home improvement business." And Mickey Rourke, it could have just been, a moment where Mickey Rourke says, "Okay, yep, I'll do it." He says, "Okay, yep, I'll do it." But it's with this asterisk that once we're even, I want to be able to still go doing my own thing. And I think that's so true to the character and so like pure and perfect. Like it still sticks with the character, but still resolves the arc. And I think that is like so great.
Exactly. Like I think that wedding, like when we get to the wedding and everyone gets their moment of complete resolution with each other, is like just like a phenomenal, like, we're wrapping this thing up and we're going home, and it's like everything feels earned and like it's a true resolution that is still true to them. It's not just like, oh, and everything works out okay. Like, I think for a lot of them, it's like, no, they're not going to be okay. Like, Mickey Rourke's probably going to be okay, but like, it'll take time for him to be okay. Kevin Bacon's not going to be okay. Like, Kevin Bacon's never going to be okay. Like,
Ellen Barkin and Daniel Stern will probably be okay.
They'll probably be okay. They'll probably be fine.
Okay.
I think Gutenberg's going to ride off into the sunset and have a great life.
Yeah, I think Gutenberg's going to be fine.
Tim Daly is not going to be okay.
No.
Like, I think Tim Daly is not going to have a good life going forward.
No.
Like,
Tim Daly's not going to be okay.
No.
And Paul Reiser is just there.
Paul Reiser's going to end up being eaten by a xenomorph in 5 years, so he's clearly not okay. Like,
I will say, Paul Reiser, though, we kind of crapped on him a little bit, but I do want to kind of shout out because he gets a great moment in the wedding scene. Because he gets to give the speech. He gets to give like the big speech. And it's just such like a great speech because it makes fun of Steve Gutenberg a little bit, but it's not overly mean. It's just a really great like best man speech.
Oh, 100%. It's the kind of best man speech that you like want at your wedding. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of best man speech that is not. It's not to call out the wedding we went to, but like it's like the antithesis of all the speeches we saw. Yeah, where like all the speeches we saw were like really nice and really positive. That's fine, but like Scully and I were getting drunk because they were all really like you can play drinking games with like how checklisty they were, and like I feel like that's the kind of speech that like hooks the people who are there, understands the relationship, and makes you care about the person. That like even more. I think it's just like a great like definition textbook best man speech. Like diner, like take notes. That's like how you do it. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about how this movie ends because it has a great end, like the very end. Because it ends, all the guys get together for like a picture. They take a picture, and then okay, movie's over. No. Then, in kind of true to the movie's fashion, we get just over the credits an extended diner conversation. We don't see them have this conversation, but we get essentially the audio of this diner conversation.
Which I have to imagine
that's what the movie's really been about. It's been about conversations.
Imagine that this is just all of these improvised bits that they like couldn't use in the actual scenes. That Levinson was like, this is just too good. We're just put it under. Forget music, forget songs. We're gonna end this movie on the material that these guys have created.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that's what the movie is about. It's about despite these things being trivial, right? Like that's I think what kind of is the coda of the movie is that despite discussions about pop songs or all these other things being trivial, not really mattering, they do matter because it's about the connection. And I think that was such a genius choice to end the movie in that way.
Absolutely. And I think that we can pretty say definitively that when it comes to best directorial debuts, this is a movie that does not feel like someone's first time directing. This feels like it's like the ninth. Oh, we'll pause because we'll probably have to edit that now. We'll edit it. Hopefully. Someone will. Right, Mike? Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, no.
I'm hoping someone will be able to edit that, but it's all good. We'll see. Mike will probably just leave it in. It'll just be a weird moment.
Just keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah, anyway, I think that like when it comes to best directorial debuts in film, Levinson and Diner needs to be in the conversation because it's a job that doesn't feel like it's his first time doing it. It's like Reservoir Dogs. Like Tarantino's first movie does not feel like someone's first movie. It feels like someone would make it their 8th or 9th one in their career. It's so well paced and everyone is so well cast and like the characters are so well drawn and positioned that I think it's just such a fully formed vision of a movie.
No, absolutely. And I think that's because you can tell this is so personal to Levinson. Like it was largely based on his life. Like he even said the football quiz was a real thing that like one of his friends did, which is like insane to me. But yeah, no, absolutely. It just feels so fully formed. So that was Diner. I think that was an excellent movie. I think
Absolutely.
this was a fantastic film.
I think that like, yeah, just to like present my final take on the movie, I think it's like it's a incredible announcement of a director's talent and of a new voice in Hollywood. I think it's a great period character piece with 6 great characters with 6 great performances off the back of a phenomenal script. And I think Levinson makes a great statement on the first outing for where he's going to go from here. I think it's a great start.
Absolutely. Well, before we go, let's kind of who is your, in terms of performances, who's your MVP of this movie? Who do you think?
It's Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke to me. I think Mickey Rourke is the best performance. I think Kevin Bacon is the flashiest performance, but I think, and I love Kevin Bacon in this, but I think Mickey Rourke is the one that is doing some really incredible subtle work throughout this movie. It's, I think, probably the best work I've seen out of Mickey Rourke. I think it's a great performance.
That's fair. I think my MVP is going to be Kevin Bacon, actually. I think Kevin Bacon, it is a flashy performance, but it's like a performance that just kind of captivates you. Like, you are just watching intently to see what Fenwick does next. Like, I think that's just really fascinating, and it's just so different than anything I have seen from Kevin Bacon at any point in his career. It's so weird. Like, it feels like he's just a completely different person. Like, it is so unhinged, and he's like, the way he's like grinning and smiling the whole time, like, I think it's a really fascinating performance. I like him a lot in this.
100%. Totally valid choice.
Absolutely. Well, that's Diner. Next week, we are going to be covering another Barry Levinson film, The Natural. Coho, you have never seen The Natural? I have seen The Natural before.
I have not seen The Natural.
You have never seen The Natural before? No. I want you to give me, like, how do you think you're going to feel about it?
I would assume I would like The Natural. I've never seen anything with Robert Redford in it that I didn't at least enjoy myself watching. So I would assume, especially with this era Robert Redford coming off of like an incredible run in the late 60s and 70s, that this is probably going to be something I enjoy. And I'm curious to see what a Barry Levinson sports movie looks like.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for watching. This was FilmograFeed, our first episode on Diner. Thank you very much. See you later.